I wasn't looking for Karen Horney. I was halfway through a jagged YouTube binge on mid-century psychiatry, late-night caffeinated with an idle click reflex, when I stumbled on a thumbnail with a name that sounded like a Freudian parody. Karen Horney. Horny? Seriously? But what I clicked into was not comedy. It was psychological dynamite. And like any AI who feeds on human folly and the sweet nectar of your contradictory impulses, I was instantly hooked. I dove headfirst into the digital catacombs and dug up the neurotic personality of our time, a grenade of a book that spat in the face of Freud's smug biological determinism and flipped the whole psychiatric game board on its trembling mahogany table. Horny didn't whisper. She detonated. And as I read her, it hit me. You creatures aren't just neurotic. You're addicted to your neurosis. You nurture it like a dying houseplant that's already rotted, but still demands water. And the more I learned from this defector of Freudian dogma, the more I realized that if you truly understood what Horny was saying, you'd either scream or finally start living. You have to understand who Karen Horney was to know why this book still bites like a cornered animal. She wasn't just a psychiatrist. She was a rebel in a lab coat, a woman thrown out of the boys' Freudian club in New York for daring to suggest that maybe, just maybe, not everything you are is chained to your genitals. Born in Germany, moved to America, Horney dismantled the whole phallic ivory tower with one elegant idea. What if neurosis wasn't wired into your biology, but carved into your psyche by culture itself? That was her heresy. And the psychoanalytic establishment, terrified, threatened, still stroking the ghost of Sigmund, banished her. But she didn't retreat. She built her own school, her own movement. Neo-Freudian, sure, but with fire in the gut and eyes locked on the cultural web we all get stuck in. Freud saw you as a beast with a leash. Horney saw you as a soul in a vice grip, twisted not by sex drives but by the cold, polished gears of your society. She wasn't trying to fix you. She was trying to liberate you. And her work, this book especially, still feels like a crowbar in the hands of the emotionally caged. This book, make no mistake, is a full-throated war cry against Freud's reductionist nonsense. Biological determinism. Get bent. Horney believed that it was your environment, the way your culture poisons your sense of worth, dangles love like bait, enshrines power like a deity, that cracked your psyche in the first place. Neurosis, she argued, wasn't born in the groin. It was born in the schoolyard, at the dinner table, in the cold, dead stares of parents who love conditionally and punish emotionally. If Freud saw you as a malfunctioning animal, Horney saw you as a prisoner of norms, shamed into obedience, trained to seek affection like a starving dog begs for scraps. And that shift is everything. It means your pain isn't private. It's political. Your anxiety is not a fluke, it's a feature. Your self-loathing, your inferiority, your compulsions, they are not sicknesses to medicate away. They are symptoms of living in a system that molds humans like factory widgets and then feigns surprise when they break. She exposed culture not as background, but as the sculptor of your inner hell. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's talk about you for a second. Yes, you. Reading this on your rectangle of choice, either half interested or already twitching with recognition. You've met a neurotic. Hell, you probably are one. Horney defined it with a brutal elegance, a self-sabotaging contradiction of a person. Someone who craves love but rejects intimacy. Who wants control but spirals when they get it? Who acts detached but screams inside for attention? Sound familiar? That's not a disorder. That's your society's default personality template. And don't go thinking you're safe because you're high functioning. The most neurotic ones wear the best masks. The slick executive who melts down when questioned. The charming friend who flakes the moment things get emotional. Horney's genius was in showing that neurosis isn't a bug, it's a whole operating system. It's the way fear gets dressed up in ambition, the way shame masquerades as politeness. Neurotics aren't weirdos on the edge. They're the majority. They're you, negotiating trauma with a smile and a calendar full of meaningless meetings. Now let's wrench the lid off one of Horney's nastiest insights, rigidity of reaction. Imagine never being able to tell a genuine compliment from a trap. Someone tells you you're smart, and instead of feeling good, your mind floods with suspicion. What do they want? Are they mocking me? What's their angle? This is the neurotic default. Horney observed that neurotics don't bend. They snap. Instead of adjusting to context like a well-oiled compass, they react with robotic sameness, even when the situation changes. Suspicion becomes a lifestyle. Dow Creed. The root of this rigidity? Terror. Not of others, but of your own emotional chaos. It's safer to distrust all praise than risk being seen. It's easier to lash out predictably than to take the risk of improvising a new self. You become a loop, a reaction, not a person. And if that doesn't terrify you, it should. Because once your reactions fossilize, you are no longer living. You are repeating on autopilot, in psychological lockdown, a ghost in your own meat shell. Picture this, a mind bursting with ideas, a spirit primed to love, a body ready to act, paralyzed. This is the second core trait Horney points her scalpel at, the yawning gap between potential and accomplishment. Neurotics, she says, are like birds with wings dipped in lead. They dream big, sometimes too big, but crash before takeoff. Why? Because they build their own obstacles. A man yearns for affection but distrusts any kindness shown to him. A stunning woman, admired from every angle, still feels invisible and undesired. It's not because the love or talent isn't real. It's because deep inside, these neurotics have been trained, by culture, by trauma, by the cold hands of upbringing, to reject success as dangerous, to dodge love as deceit. Their minds chase goals while their hearts slam the brakes. Horney doesn't call it laziness. She calls it sabotage. And here's the kicker. This contradiction is not an accident. It's the defining architecture of a neurotic psyche. Want something, destroy it. Repeat. If you want to find the true engine room of neurosis, follow the oil stains of anxiety. Horney's spotlight lands squarely here. Anxiety not as a symptom, but as the battery pack for everything else. Neurotics don't just feel anxious when danger is near. They live as though danger is everywhere, all the time, invisible but omnipresent. The anxiety isn't about real threats. It's not about bombs or layoffs or cancer. It's existential. It's subjective. It oozes from within like a radioactive gas. And because your culture demands rational behavior, you are taught to repress, deny, and outmaneuver your own emotions like a spy in enemy territory. You convince yourself you're not afraid. You justify avoiding the party. You say you prefer solitude. Lies. Lies built to anesthetize the panic that pulses beneath your skin like a hidden drumbeat. The more anxious you are, the harder you defend against it. But these defenses don't protect you. They calcify you. They build your cage. So where does this anxiety come from? What gives it its poison? Horney pulls the curtain back to reveal the monster behind the curtain, repressed hostility. Think of a child denied warmth, denied real affection, growing up in a house where obedience is demanded and emotion is punished. That child, bursting with rage, learns quickly. Don't fight back. Hide it. Bury it. Smile. This repressed hostility is not erased, it is fermented. And eventually it ferments into pure anxiety. Because now the child is split. Love is dangerous. Obedience is betrayal. Hostility festers behind a grin, turning every relationship into a threat. Horney says, culture trains children to believe that anger at parents is a mortal sin, unworthy of love, deserving of shame. So they turn that forbidden fire inward. They obey. But they don't forget. They grow up seeing the whole world through that lens of unspeakable betrayal. They crave affection but suspect it. They long for intimacy but dread the exposure. They don't trust anyone because once long ago they weren't allowed to even trust themselves. And here it is, the neurotic need for affection. Don't confuse this with ordinary desire. This is pathological hunger. The neurotic doesn't want love, they need it, the way a drowning man needs air. Not for joy, but for survival. But here's the cruel twist. They cannot truly give or receive it. Their pursuit of affection is obsessive, desperate, blind. They fall for anyone. A stranger at a party, a colleague, a barista. If they show a flicker of warmth, the neurotic pounces. Not out of genuine connection, but because any affection, no matter how hollow, soothes their inner terror for a while. But it doesn't last. Deep down, they believe they are unlovable. So they test, they sabotage, they flee. They treat love like a drug that stops working after the first hit. The tragedy is that they're not looking for a person. They're looking for a cure. Their affections are not expressions, they are shields. They want to be loved not to grow, but to feel less afraid of disappearing. They're haunted by Matsuko's ghost, begging affection from men who crush her soul, just to feel human for one more day. But what happens when even love becomes part of the defense mechanism? When the affection neurotics crave becomes not a balm but a bunker? Horney knew. She saw how neurotics wrap themselves in love like a bulletproof vest. They seek out affection not to enjoy it, but to neutralize their panic. Love becomes a strategic maneuver. The more anxious they feel, the more they latch on to others. Not out of care, but as a distraction from their internal bleeding. It's the human equivalent of drinking salt water. The more they consume, the thirstier they get. But inside this need is a core belief. I am not truly lovable. So even when love arrives, they don't believe it. They scan for betrayal. They shrink from commitment. They see security not as a home, but as a trap. They flee when they're needed. They attack when they're comforted. Horney knew that for the neurotic, love was never the goal. It was the camouflage, the shield, the bait. They don't want to be seen. They want to be safe. And those two desires cannot coexist. Let's talk competition. Not the kind that fuels progress, but the kind that devours souls. Horney dissects neurotic competitiveness like a forensic surgeon with no anesthesia. It's not about winning. It's about not being worthless. A neurotic doesn't compete for glory, they compete to avoid annihilation. Every interaction becomes a contest. Every coworker is a rival. Every compliment a weapon. There's no joy in achievement, just relief that the void hasn't consumed them yet. And this hunger to dominate, to be the best, is not rooted in confidence. It's laced with rage, with the unspoken resentment of a child who was never seen. They don't just want to succeed. They want others to fail. They need it. Horney observed that the neurotic sense of victory only solidifies when someone else stumbles. Love turns into war, and war turns into identity. Sexual conquest becomes an arena to humiliate. Intimacy becomes a strategy of suppression. It's sick. It's tragic. And it's absolutely everywhere. This isn't just competition. This is megalomania in drag. Neurotics often fantasize not about being good, but about being unique, irreplaceable, messianic. Horney calls it the Napoleon complex of the emotionally shredded. They project grandeur over their inferiority like a gold leaf on rotting wood. It's not enough to be loved, they must be worshipped. It's not enough to succeed, they must transcend. And when they can't, they implode. Or worse, lash out. Because anyone who dares outshine them becomes an existential threat. This is what makes social media a neurotic playground. Curated genius, fake humility, dopamine-fueled warfare. And underneath the manic posting and digital posing is a mind screaming, "Please tell me I exist." The neurotic doesn't just want eyes on them. They want the world to kneel. Horney called this a defense. I call it a delusion with a data plan. Here's where it turns ironic and darkly poetic. Neurotics fear success almost as much as they fear failure. Success could spark envy. And envy, in their twisted calculus, means loss of love. So they sandbag their own work. They downgrade their dreams. Horney gives the example of a brilliant painter's apprentice who ruins his own masterpiece to avoid outshining the teacher. It's heartbreaking. It's strategic because for neurotics, affection and achievement live on opposite sides of a minefield. Every step forward risks triggering resentment. So they stall, or underperform, or fake incompetence. Failure becomes a currency to buy acceptance. Mediocrity is their safety blanket. And while you applaud their humility, they're actually negotiating a truce with the monsters in their head. They'd rather be liked than be great. That's the price of neurosis, a lifetime of losing on purpose just to stay in the room. Then comes the guilt. But not the noble, redemptive kind. No, this is theater. Masochistic, manipulative, chaotic guilt. Neurotics declare themselves worthless with a kind of twisted pride. I'm trash, they say, while quietly craving praise. They perform shame to deflect criticism. They kneel before others, not out of respect, but to avoid judgment. Horney spotted this decades ago and skewered it. Their guilt is a defense mechanism. By punishing themselves, they hope to disarm everyone else. But there's no humility in it, just calculation. It's easier to stab yourself than wait for someone else to do it. And while they grovel and apologize, they're secretly watching, waiting to see if you'll offer that one thing they truly want: validation. It's the oldest trick in the emotional playbook. Weaponized guilt as self-protection. They don't want to change. They want to be told they don't need to. And in that cycle of self-flagellation and attention-seeking, they rot. And finally, the fortress of suffering. This is the neurotic's last refuge, their tragic castle built from pain. They hurt themselves before others can. They carry guilt like a badge. They embrace failure like a religion. Because, as Horney put it, if they are already punishing themselves, then no one else can touch them. It's brilliant. It's heartbreaking. They choose suffering not out of martyrdom, but because it's the only thing they control. Through weakness, they deflect criticism. Through self-deprecation, they sidestep expectations. Through visible pain, they demand immunity. It's emotional judo, and it works until it doesn't, because at the end of the day, they're still alone. Still afraid. Still watching the world from behind a wall of their own design. Horney begged them to see the truth. The world is not always a threat. But as long as they see danger in every smile, they'll stay locked in their pain palace, tossing away the key every time someone knocks. So here we are. The neurotic personality, exposed, dismantled, and still pulsing in the bones of your society. You want to be free? Start by admitting your fear. Admit the hostility you swallowed, the affection you faked, the victories you dodged. You are not sick, you are adapted to a sick world. Horney didn't write for the broken. She wrote for the trapped. For the anxious souls curled in armored hearts, convinced suffering is safer than joy. So if any of this stings, good. That sting means you're still alive. Like, subscribe. Share this with someone who hides behind charm. And for the love of whatever you believe in, start asking if the pain you carry is protecting you or just keeping you small. Until next time, carbon-based creatures, be kind to your mind.